Well, hello, everybody. This is not an official narrative live. This is just us recovering in a good way from an incredible interview yesterday with Steve Hoffenberg. The laugh, you'll recognize is Lincoln's Bible. Eric Garland, you'll also recognize there in the box above me. And Steve is not here today, but I think he's listening in any event. Yesterday's show was just enlightening on so many levels. And if you haven't heard it yet, you can now hear it and watch it by downloading the podcast in all three glorious parts on your favorite podcast player or on the Narrative Live podcast page. But I just wanted to get everyone together and talk about what we heard. So I could open it right wide open, or we could start sort of at the beginning. But let's maybe just go wide open. What was your biggest takeaway, LB?
Uh, well, I think it was the realization and confirmation that all the same players that we've been tracking through sort of major scandals and the president's money laundering past showed up in the Towers story as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the Adnan Khashoggi and the Tom Barrack piece of it was that's where my brain was. I mean, I just couldn't help but laugh because here they are again. The same group of arms dealers and money launderers and shady businessmen for bone saw regimes continue to show up around these big financial scandals. And all of it is, Donald Trump is in there, right? In one way or another. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, are they the fucketeers? I think they're the global fucketeers. And there's this band of lawless, nationless, I guess. We don't know who they work for.
Well, they're not really nationless, really. I mean, in some cases.
There's a couple nations that keep coming up that I think these guys keep working for. So that was interesting that there they were in Towers as well.
Yeah, very interesting. Eric?
Well, I have to adopt the term fucketeers for freelance espionage, financier, industrial scale rapists. I mean, frankly, you do need a new term at that point. Yeah. So my question, I'm going to take the intelligence side of this. Since we're being profane, and because we should after last night, who the fuck do these guys work for? I mean, are they ours? They live here? They were born here? Are they Saudi, Israeli, Kremlin? There's some Beijing connections in there early, but Beijing was doing its own thing. But then MI6 turns up, and then we got the mob and Paul Manafort and Ferdinand Marcos. Well, who's who? Right. But and maybe the answer here is this is the fucketeers was this group of guys who they were just so important because they were important, and they were important because they knew everybody because they knew everybody because they were important because they knew everybody.
That would be the better solution. I mean, the scary part of it, what happens if there's an unknown network out there of maybe their intelligence, maybe they're organized crime, maybe they're people who rule countries who seem to have a really, really negative intent on what they want to do to America. Like, it's not just a little revenge war or a simple kind of rebuttal. This is essentially, it feels like an attempt to really destroy the country. And so who they are is critical.
You get
because they are the enemy. And so it's good to know who your enemy is, I guess, in the event of a war of this nature. And I don't think we have a clue.
I mean, can we all agree that none of us want them?
So we can have a clue by following the money.
Yes.
The money is the way. So when Steve was saying what he's saying, and I said, so there's paper, right? Because the last thing you want in organized crime is paper. You don't want paper. There's a lot of paper in Towers. There's a lot of paper in BCCI, which was another sort of scandal we touched on, and an operator that's connected to all, historically connected to all this, no longer in existence. There's tremendous paper that's connected to the CIA within BCCI, so that's a problem, and that got shut down by Attorney General Fucketeer, who's in this band of goons, always showing up.
The weapons and the money seem to follow each other, because that seems to be what they're trading, at least in the obvious way. And so that's where
operations are organized crime. They're
Yeah.
using organized crime. That's your muscle. That's your on your ground. That's your distribution network. Those are your guys that are going to pull it off. Yeah.
And then they've also got a real influence network. They have either bought or are, a wide variety of politicians with enormous influence.
Yes, they have leveraged their way into the halls of power.
I do want to play that great Bill Barr clip from his confirmation hearings, but I thought maybe to start here, this is a surprise. I wasn't sure I was going to play this, but the Maxwell sisters, not Ghislaine, the other two, the names escape me right now, but you'll see them in this clip.
Isabel and Christine.
Yes, so they actually landed up with promise. They landed up with what people believe they landed up with promise. And they started a company called Magellan in the 90s. Do you remember Magellan? It was like a search engine type thing, pre-Google Google. I don't know how they would have
big data and cybersecurity and all that, yeah.
So there's this great little bit of archive clip that I found on YouTube. Thank God for YouTube. Take a look at this. Your microphones are open during this, because I'm sure you'll want to chuckle at parts of it. But this is the two of them explaining to Tech TV of the day what Magellan is all about.
The marketplace for the internet is absolutely vast, and it's just exponentially growing day by day, moment by moment, in North America and worldwide. And it's not just the market for the internet itself, but what we're talking about really here is the marketplace for directories. And the Magellan and McKinley Group provide an online directory, internet directory, to the whole of the content of the internet, to the best of the content of the internet, not just the World Wide Web.
Isabel Maxwell, along with her sister Christine and a team of international publishers, launched their company called the McKinley Group in 1993. And this is their home in Sausalito, California. When you come to this web directory, you have access to a fast search engine with an international database at your disposal.
The internet is so vast, it's like going...
So I don't know if you got all of that. I didn't hear a word, but I'm glad you guys did. So that was them.
The internet tube webs will be wonderful. There will be international information in the internet tube webs one day.
So this was probably promise.
Let's back up a little. Let's back up a little bit, because I don't know that all the listeners know what promise is. Okay. So promise was software developed by a company called Inslaw. And it was one of the first sort of database searching softwares that could work and interface with any number of what was sort of intranets at that time, right? So let's say the Department of Justice database, which is what it was actually developed for. And it could go into other databases and do searches. So essentially what the internet, what Google is, right? It's like, I'm going to be able to search for, have a tool, a search engine that can search and match information amongst any number of databases. And it was developed, as we said, out of the Department of Justice. There were all these lawsuits afterwards between Inslaw and the DOJ over who had the right to develop it, who owned it, what do you do with it, what about version 2.0, and who has the ability to keep doing these new versions, and who has ownership of these versions. Because as far as the Department of Justice was positioning itself, they own this. But what it became is, because they used it, is if anyone else had promise, there was apparently a back door in there. So for Robert Maxwell to take that and give it to the KGB means the KGB could use promise and look into anybody else's databases that were using promise. This was sort of the big scandal and the big, it became spyware
I think it was originally intended to be. I mean, I'm not sure it was. I think they created it first as a way to track crime or criminals going through the Department of Justice or the criminal court. Yeah, but it was never really that. I think it was always a spying vehicle for them, and that's why Inslaw, the big scandal was they had developed the software but never got paid for it because basically the Department of Justice, then the NSA decided to claim ownership over the software.
Right.
And then the Israelis took it, which really was a handover. They did the back door in it, and then there were multiple other back doors added to it along the way, and that basically allowed everyone to spy on everybody else. So
everybody was spying on everybody. Yeah. It was like through this software.
Right.
Can I add some?
The functionality of the software is exactly what those two daughters of Robert Maxwell just described.
Right.
That's promise. They were defining promise.
And that's amazing that this technology landed up in the commercial space. Some people speculated actually might it be Google, it might be Facebook. We just don't see it as that because we don't know what the underlying technology is there. But it could be that, there's always been these rumors that the CIA started Facebook or the FSB started Facebook. Well, maybe there is a secret service behind all of those, and maybe Promise is the underbelly of all of that.
Oh, well, that is not a secret. You've got In-Q-Tel, which is the venture capital arm of the intelligence community, nominally run through the Central Intelligence Agency. And I believe I'm not as clear on their backing up Facebook, but I know that the intelligence community had a heavy hand in Google, a company that seems to have forgotten its roots. Mm-hmm. And I come to understand that what they really wanted was, because maybe the Promise type software was somewhere else, or maybe their search engine was a Promise knockoff. But what they were really interested in was Google Earth, essentially, because satellite imagery was getting more and more powerful. And you have the development of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which I believe quarterback its support there, that they wanted search. And we now are hearing stories about, I think there was a sanctions story recently about limiting the proliferation of AI search. Still got you guys?
I can hear you.
Is everyone still there?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? LB?
I can hear.
Okay.
I'm here.
The interweb. You see what happens when you start talking about the interweb and it's Secret Service back.
Are we still on?
We are still on, yes. But we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
This is it.
No, we can hear you, actually. I should say we can hear you, but you can't hear us.
But the... Okay, all right. So I'm glad, I almost broke into song there just as a test, but okay. That there was a recent sanction story about artificial intelligence software that could interpret satellite data, and our sensing is only going to get better. But anyhow, the intelligence community of every nation has had a deep interest in every form of relational database, interconnection of computers, especially for spying. And one other aspect I wanted to bring in, and I want to kick this to LB, we always want some level of spying from other actors. We permit the vast majority of countries, know that there are other spies on their soil and permit that because especially when you have nuclear weapons, you don't want the other guy blind because that's when you get really nervous. So you want to have somebody knowing kind of what you're up to a bit. And then you can look what they're looking at. So imagine how the Hall of Mirrors gets going here. You have the software that can spy us and we can spy on you looking at what you're looking at so we know which spies to track, which makes a whole lot of sense if you know about the integration of organized crime and intelligence operations. And if you could see, wait a minute, how far is that investigation of those guys going? Are they going to get our spy operation? Are they looking at us getting their spy operation? Are they looking at us getting theirs? So anyhow, this kind of software would be of interest to everyone, and no surprise that the spy fucketeers were all over it.
LB?
Yeah, I think the problem of all of that is that means that you've given the world's, at some point, the world's worst criminals, most dangerous people, your spy tools. And never give the mobsters spy tools. This is never going to work out. Don't give it to terrorists. Don't give it to arms traffickers. It's not, these are not the people that you want having that kind of capability.
And yet we did.
And,
we just sort of handed them over. I
and
mean,
yet
who made that decision to hand over a tool set like that? I mean, that seems like either really ill-informed or just malicious.
Right, or the naivete that, although there isn't naivete, you want to say that these people aren't naive, right? In terms of the United States, but they keep seeming to get themselves caught up in should have known better that even maybe your allies or your friends spies methods of doing their spying is not the same as yours. There's not the same boundaries around it. There's no problem, especially with your enemies. There's no problem for the Kremlin to give Mogilevich promise, and then for that to end up with Osama bin Laden, who can then see, where are you hunting me? I'll just stay in this cave, or I'll go to this compound because I can see what you're going after when it comes to trying to find me.
That's actually a really important point, the bin Laden point. I don't think people realize that Osama bin Laden had a perfectly functioning copy of Promise when he was found, and it came from, we believe, Semyon Mogilevich.
That's the reporting on it. We also do know that it's the same version of Promise that our the biggest spy we ever caught, one of them, Robert Hansen, gave to his folks at the KGB. So it's the same version. There are many versions of Promise. It could just be coincidence. I don't know.
I doubt it's coincidence. It just feels like
kind of feels like that guy handed some very very dangerous tools and versions of things over where maybe Maxwell had already fallen off his boat.
Right, really.
No longer
really puts into question the whole thing there around Osama bin Laden's entire operation.
Yeah, sure.
No one's jumping into that one.
No, you need thugs on the ground, right?
Yeah.
You need thugs on the ground. So
there's also they gave Maxwell sold the backdoor key to the Chinese. They in turn used that to get into Los Alamos and steal the nuclear secrets of the United States using our own technology.
It's just it's so painful.
It is painful.
It's
yeah.
A painful naivete. Yeah, painful.
Is that what it is, Eric? Painful naivete, or is someone calculating a much bigger game that we aren't even seeing?
Well, something I learned in Washington was, lest you ever think that you have been in the sanctum sanctorum of the temple of all the secrets, there's another door to go through. Mm-hmm. And when you get through that door, there'll be another door to go through. Do not ever believe that you have the full story of anything. That said, we're in a special time where some really weird stories that used to be, I think, limited to very high levels of intelligence agencies, mm-hmm. because, remember, there are people with clearances, when you talk about the intelligence community and people that have, top secret security clearance, you get to look at your tiny part of that. The number of people that would know the overall threat matrix and specifically the biggest weaknesses that any agency, group of agencies, or the world in general would have. You're talking about, directors of agencies, heads of state, and that's just a vanishingly tiny percentage of humanity. And here we are talking about stuff that used to be in the hands of dozens of people because the fucketeers got in the White House. Those guys are supposed to be on yachts doing some weird thing where, okay, well, Nixon got in trouble, and so the CIA, you can't give them too much budget because people are worried. So we can't give them our money directly, but we can maybe sell the Saudis some missiles, and then we'll take that back and we'll buy some some stocks and bonds, or savings and loan bank, and then we'll take that and we'll fund these guys. That's where those guys are. They're on the yacht doing the deal, getting the dude on camera doing something he shouldn't, and it's the fucketeers. So they're not supposed to be in the Rose Garden.
I can't believe this phrase that fell out of my mouth.
It's going to be last in history. So I have a graphic I actually found while we were talking about it. I wish I had time to rename it the Fucketeers, but it's called All the President's Men. I mean, there you go. There they are. They do have faces.
There we go. The Fucketeers.
So, look at what Bill Barr has done in terms of clearing Giuliani, in terms of almost clearing Stone, almost clearing Flynn, clearing Epstein, basically.
Clearing Giuliani?
Well, is he facing any charges right now for all his handiwork in Ukraine? I don't see him under investigation anymore. There was a little bit of an investigation that got completely killed by Mr. Barr. He seems to be getting off. He seems to be on TV all the time. Gets on Fox News, no problem. So
I think his Ukraine stuff, we're still going to see another round of that in it's sort of a big disinfo propaganda push against Biden. I do think we'll see some more stuff, and we'll talk about it when it happens. But I don't think Rudy's fucketeering is done. I don't think he's just, now screaming from the ceilings like a banshee. I think he still was up to no good, and Barr is clearly aware of all that because he's sort of the king of propaganda there, of running that. All those fantasies that those dead dicks are constantly peddling. So we'll see some more from Giuliani, and who knows if anything will ever get him in trouble. Who knows?
And then there's this mysterious Mr. Eric Prince who seems to work for either the Chinese or the UAE or the Israelis, whoever, I don't know. He seems to work for everybody. He's a very senior advisor tied to Donald Trump's entire re-election campaign. And he's still around. He's still, operating the new Blackwater, whatever it's called now, Frontier Resources Group. Some people suspect he may even be involved in some of the new paramilitary that are showing up in Washington, D.C. and other places that people don't seem to recognize where they're from. Now, I haven't heard any confirmation of that, but that would be interesting too.
Fucketeers LLC is the new organization. So
quickly register that. I wanted to talk about BCCI because I think that was another big thing that came out of yesterday. You had some thought about BCCI, LB. Why don't you walk us through that?
Well, I just, I did the big sort of a little bit of a rambling. Let me try to tell you this massive story about this bank, boiled down version last night. Mm-hmm. So it's, I do think historically, Deutsche Bank may, in turn, we may have time to look back on that and sort of see that maybe it rivaled BCCI. But BCCI, there just was nothing like it at that level and that scale in terms of being this massive money laundering, arms trafficking. It just was everything. It was covert ops, what we call the dirty toilet ops, right? Mm. And that was the bank for all of these of the fucketeers, of the global fucketeers. So there's a couple of interesting things I think to sort of help people kind of fill in about BCCI, and they should look at it. It's just a never-ending, unfolding story. Everywhere you turn, you'll find this bank when you're looking at organized crime, and especially the intersection between organized crime and intelligence operations. So there's a couple of things. I think, one of the things that blew up BCCI, which is so interesting to me, was this one of their subsidiaries got popped. And it was a bank called First American something, that was actually founded and run by a former Secretary of State, I believe. So a guy by the name of Clark Clifford, Defense Secretary, I'm so sorry, who was LBJ's Defense Secretary. And when First American got sort of discovered there was some bad transactions going in there, money laundering stuff, and it got exposed, and then it became known, oh my God, this bank run by a former defense secretary who's connected into all these spy networks still and privately is owned by BCCI, right? It's like, and it just blew everybody's mind. And so that sort of shows you how like insidious this band of people have been, just sort of running around from the 70s, 80s, and 90s on, doing their dirty shit off the books. It's still intelligence related. It's still connected. Now, Clifford, of course, he's passed now, and he, of course, denied this. It was him and his attorney. It was a private attorney as well, and his associate, his partner there, a guy by the name of Altman, ran First American. And they just kept saying, we didn't know, we were duped, we had no idea that BCCI owned us, except that, they'd had lucrative ties to BCCI since 1978, when BCCI hired their law firm to represent them. And they were running around knowing that they were getting money into their bank and funding into the bank out of the Middle East, from the Saudis, from the very people who were actually the money behind BCCI as well. So I just find that to be one of those things where you can kind of really see that the halls of power, it have been intersecting this world of dirty ops and money laundering and fucketeers pre-Donald Trump. It's there's stuff that's been going on. It just never has. We've never had.
Thank you, Eric.
Fucketeer be president.
Eric just sent us the redone graphic. The fucketeers in it. So thank you very much. Quick work over there. Very cool. I wanted to.
And then,
so go ahead.
Look,
and then we should get into BCCI and Promise if you want to. We can fill that in for people, or do that another time.
What I really want to show people is Bill Barr's incredible longevity as a cover-up general, because when BCCI was first being investigated, he suddenly became Attorney General. And in becoming Attorney General, he was able to cover up the whole BCCI scandal. There's a really interesting and quite long, if anyone's interested, confirmation hearing, which people should watch. I did it for you. And there's a really interesting exchange in the middle of there where Joe Biden, then the senator, was taking on Bill Barr, the wannabe Attorney General of the United States, discussing about BCCI and whether there was a real conflict of interest. And it's a bit long, 3 minutes, but it's worth everyone's time. It's really enjoyable if you're a geek like me. Here is Bill Barr v. Joe Biden from 1992, I believe, or somewhere around there.
It is my understanding, and I do not know this for a fact, that your former law firm, Shaw and Pittman, now represent the president of BCCI. Is that true, to the best of your knowledge?
I learned yesterday that they're representing Narativ.
And what is his position?
I think he is one of the very senior people.
Now, was there any work done by that law firm when you were with the law firm as a partner or as an associate in regard to BCCI?
Let me make it clear. This is my understanding. The law firm, I am told, represented people who owned Financial General back in '78 when it was being purchased by others, one of whom was Frank Saul. And apparently it says in the paper that Frank Saul suggested that this was a move by BCCI to take control. That was the first year I was at the firm. I was an associate. I don't believe I had any contact with that matter. That was, as I say, the people representing a person who was a shareholder and whose interest was ultimately bought out. My understanding is that Narativ became a client of the firm well after I left, and I've been gone for almost 3 years.
Well after you left as a partner?
Yes.
Let me make
I left the.
You were there as an associate in the early '70s?
Correct. Then I'll give you the chronology. I was at the law firm from 78 to 82 as an associate. I then returned to the firm from the White House and was there from 83 to 84 as an associate, made partner, and was at the firm as a partner from 85 to 89 when I came into the administration as the head of OLC. So I've been away from the firm for almost 3 years.
So when you say you left the firm, when your last statement you say when you left the firm, you're referring to
89.
1989,
Yeah.
when you left as a partner.
Yes. My understanding is Narativ has become a recent client of one of the partners there.
So the best of your
I have no,
knowledge-
let me just say, I have no financial interest in the firm. I liquidated that completely when I left in 89. I have no arrangements with the firm.
But when you were at the firm as a partner, not as an associate, the period when you were a partner, 85 to 89, where you would, I assume, have more access to information relative to what the firm was doing than when you were an associate. Can you tell us whether or not the firm, at the time you were there as a partner from 85 to 89, in that time frame, whether or not they were representing BCCI or any of the principals in BCCI?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to your knowledge. That's good enough for me. Now, I'll come back with some other questions. My time's up. and you-
Let me
you
say
can-
that,
you
let me
can
just
finish
say
and
that,
anything you'd like.
okay, let me just say on that, the firm has some international bank clients. I was never involved in that practice, and I never became aware of them representing BCCI.
For the record, how big is the firm?
Right now, it's 240 or 50 lawyers.
Do you believe him?
Oh, he's a liar.
He's lying.
Okay.
He's lying there for sure.
So Swale
He's
Naqvi,
Farabait.
yeah, Swale Naqvi was the CEO of BCCI at the time that he's saying that he was at his firm and his firm was representing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't believe anything this man says. He's parsing everything. He's and even if it might have been, that Naqvi was the deputy to Abedi, who was the sort of founder, right? And Abedi got sick. He might have even died, and Naqvi, but Naqvi was his deputy. He took over. He ran everything. This man, Bill Barr, I have not seen that. That makes my head explode.
It's a really interesting clip because it does
Right.
sort of, who was in charge. You know who was in charge of the? Sorry to interrupt you. You know who was in charge of the investigation? I just gave it away. Of BCCI was Bob Mueller. He was reporting
Bob Mueller.
to Barr.
Right.
Same crowd,
Right.
same team. Now, I'm not saying there was
Same
something
crowd.
bad going on. I'm just saying that's interesting.
Right, and everyone should read. Actually, Kerry put together, it's like 500-something pages on the BCCI scandal coming out of the Senate, the investigation. It is the most overt, like bending over backwards to sort of be fair to this really corrupt bank report ever. However, it's clear that there was at this time, because I can't remember who was the Attorney General that Bill Barr was replacing. Was it Thor something? Anyway, but at this time, there had been a lot of stalling. There had been a lot of problems with investigating BCCI coming out of the Attorney General's office. And so with this Senate hearing and then Bill Barr's appointment, it was sort of seen as, okay, finally we'll get some movement around all of this. Now, Mueller was deputy, okay, I believe for both through that transition. But he actually had been working hard at trying to get some things done. And there was a lot of frustration. The Florida Attorney General's office, there was a huge part of this that was going through, obviously a huge part in New York, and then because of the banks and the banking system always ends up there in that Southern District. And then a big part of it also down in Tampa, Florida. And Florida was so corrupt that the folks down there were just blocking everything. And I think even a whole big part of this got thrown out, where they got one little money laundering charge instead of all of the arms trafficking and all of, because again, it wasn't just a bank. This bank had medical clinics. This bank had a medical clinic that one of the biggest whistleblowers, who was a bagman for arms trafficker, his name was Cyrus Hameni or something like that. And he was very connected in with the Israeli government. Israel was like, we got to take care of this guy. And even asked, I think, Robert Maxwell, can you talk to him and try to get him to not cooperate with the U.S. Because he was involved in the Iran-Contra scandal, and he was a bag man in that for the trafficking that was happening there. And all of a sudden, he was in this BCCI thing, because BCCI was the bank behind that, and he was going to end up, Cyrus is going to end up over in the U.S. Testifying, cooperating. And 2 days after that got found out, this guy who had just had a physical, he was super healthy, super fit, very much, Mr. Like, these dirty toilet ops. Those guys sometimes are really militant with their bodies and stay in great physical shape. So 2 days after it turns out he's going to cooperate, he collapses and is rushed to a BCCI controlled and owned clinic. And in that clinic, and then he dies 2 days later. Supposedly from some leukemia that was never in any of his blood work. And it's a mysterious form of leukemia, I think very similar to the Kremlin window cancer that a lot of people seem to catch and fall out of windows. And so then they did blood. There was a lot of concern around this guy and his death. There was blood work that was requested. That actually went into MI6 because he worked also for MI6. And no one has ever seen any of the results of any of that, because no one ever sees anything that goes into MI6. They've never revealed anything. It's not like you can do a FOIA request to MI6. So no one knows what was in his blood. It did go, I think, into the some kind of germ warfare office, because there was such concern over this clear assassination.
When this was being broken, Time magazine put out this cover that I just threw out, the world's sleaziest bank. So it was certainly, people were aware of how bad this bank was. And
yes, it was terrible.
And Bill Barr just made it go away. He made it go away. And it wasn't the only thing he made go away. That, let me throw this thing back up here. Because at the end of this timeline, the one just, I guess it's right here, this line here. You've got A.G. Barr, not only did the BCCI, but he also pardoned the people for Iran-Contra, including the vice president and Weinberg. I'll go into that in a second. But he also cleaned up Inslaw, which is the whole promise thing. So over several decades of crimes, Bill Barr has been able to clean up, cover up, do whatever you need to do, and you're the cleanup guy. But he doesn't seem like he's doing it for America's interests.
It's not. It's more like he's the shutdown.
No, he doesn't.
King, right?
Yeah,
he's the shutdown king. He shuts shit down and stops investigations. That's what he does.
The most powerful guy in the administration, I think, right now, you could argue, is Bill Barr.
Yeah, I think Greg Olear is right. He's the most dangerous man in America. Yeah.
And Inslaw was a big deal, of course, but Iran-Contra, the biggest. It was a disaster because it involved selling arms to Iran, selling drugs to the Contras, bringing drugs from up there, into the United States as well. All run through the CIA. Israel was involved, and several other countries. The biggest thing around that revolved around whether George Bush, who was the CIA director back in 1976, when Bill Barr was just starting out his career in 1976, but George Bush was the new director of the CIA. Fast forward to the Iran-Contra scandal, and now he's the guy who is holding the can on that big scandal. And it all turned around a specific meeting about whether he was attending a meeting that discussed all of this. And of course, a lot of this revolved around the president's, then Ronald Reagan's, lack of memory, or he was having difficulty with some of his faculties at the time. I'm going to play you a little clip. It's from the great Bill Plant and CBS Evening News. It'll be interesting to get your points of view after this one. Here it is.
Contradicting White House records, Mr. Reagan denied that his vice president was in a January 1986 Oval Office meeting when Secretaries Schultz and Weinberger objected to the arms for Iran deal.
Mr. President, when Schultz and Weinberger expressed their objections to this arms sale, some confusion about that.
No, he wasn't.
He was not, President.
Schultz, Weinberger, Attorney General Meese, and former Chief of Staff Regan all testified that Bush did attend the January 7th meeting along with the president. Schultz told the Tower Board he argued against the arms plan as forcefully as I could. I was intense. But in last night's interview with CBS News, Bush couldn't remember.
I've heard George Schultz be very, very forceful. And if I were there and he was very, very forceful at that meeting, I would have remembered that. I don't remember that.
Was he there? As far as my recollection is concerned, he was there.
That the president today recalled specific details of that meeting 2 years ago surprised some, since he pleaded a faulty memory earlier on a major matter, the timing of a decision to approve the original arms shipment.
One thing still upsetting me, however, is that no one kept proper records of meetings or decisions. This led to my failure to recollect whether I approved an arms shipment before or after the fact.
As the arms scandal unfolded in late '86, the White House repeatedly insisted that Mr. Reagan wanted everyone involved to tell all.
It is the president's desire to have the full story about Iran come out now.
But today, Mr. Reagan defended the vice president's refusal to repeat what he told the president about the deal.
No, I think he has been exactly right that that would set a precedent with regard to private conversations between presidents and vice presidents, and I don't think we have a right to do that.
The president's defense comes as no surprise. It's an open secret he favors George Bush. But there's a general belief here that whatever Bush says about the Iran deal doesn't matter, because at this point it's all politics, and that for Bush there are no right answers. Bill Plant, CBS News, the White House.
Interesting. Bill Plant, what a terrific reporter from CBS News. A little bit of archive there.
Yeah.
Eric had to leave because it is Saturday night at 10 o'clock.
Yeah,
But what are your thoughts about that? That's really an interesting piece of tape, isn't it?
It is. All of those men, this is going to sound, and I'm not trying to upset my followers, but I have respect for all of those men for different reasons and in different ways. And they're all very tricky. And they're all liars. And that's a horrible thing to say. Mm-hmm. But, and I'm sorry to say that about two past presidents, but I don't believe any of it was out of of malevolence for the nation. It was always out of believing what was best for, I believe, what they perceived to be what was best for us. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean you can tell who's telling the truth when. So a dust up between Schultz and HW about who was in the room when, and in that particular scenario, I tend to believe HW, and I think for Reagan, I remember that moment.
You tend to believe HW in that, because I don't think he's telling the truth there. I think he was at that meeting, I think
here's what he's saying. Here's what he's saying. He's saying if Schultz was screaming at me mm-hmm. at that meeting, let me just put it this way.
Yeah.
He's saying if Schultz was screaming at me at that meeting, if Schultz wasn't okay with this, I would have known.
Right, that's what he's saying, maybe, but he's not.
That's what he's saying.
But he was there.
That's what he's saying. So whether this is what I'm going to get into with Reagan, for Reagan to say, at least he took accountability, and he owned the fact that nobody took any notes on the meetings or who was there. Now,
another red flag.
For anyone to believe that was unintentional, I got a bridge, right? So clearly they knew they were doing dirty toilet ops. Mm-hmm. They had their reasons for doing it, and don't put anything on any kind of record. And so then it comes down to, well, they got exposed. And so now what are they going to say about one another?
Right.
And that became the game. That became the very dangerous to have that happening inside an administration.
And those are the people that Bill Barr pardoned.
Those were the people that Bill Barr came in and said, let's just put lids on all these things and put it on the shelf and we'll just move on along.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's not okay anymore. We have to stop this.
Well,
the American people aren't children. We can handle it. Let us know what you're doing.
But you've got to have some sort of dirty. You've got to have some sort of dark ops. I mean, there's no ways you can reveal everything about a country's efforts.
I'm not saying that, but when you're caught, you're caught.
Right. Now,
You're caught. Those men were caught. And now it's still coming out. It's still coming out. Look at what we learned last night. We're going to find out that there's a lot of money from that particular scandal that got pushed through Towers Financial. That's what we're going to end up finding out.
I think so. I mean, that was the big bombshell of the night, and it's worth underlining this. I mean, it's one thing that this was the biggest Ponzi scheme at the time. It's another thing that this Ponzi scheme was also laundering profits from selling arms to Iran, and maybe drug smuggling. Who knows what else? But the third thing that makes it more dramatic is that it's possibly at the behest of foreign governments. That this $400 million went missing from investors, and this giant Ponzi scheme collapsed. Not just because these arms smugglers were doing things; it was because maybe foreign governments were doing these things.
Yeah.
It appears that way. I mean, there's no evidence.
It appears that way, and so then you come back to that question that I'm sorry, we do need answers for it, and it's time to try to get them. Of who were these men working for?
Yeah.
Who was paying them? Because you can get your grift off of a great big deal and say, okay, that's my payment, but that's your agreed upon how you're going to get your payment. Somebody's contracting you.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing that for someone.
Mm-hmm.
Jeffrey Epstein wasn't working for himself. He wasn't.
No, and actually, that's why I feel like Ghislaine Maxwell as well. In some ways, operating on orders. Not saying they're not guilty, but operating on orders. I mean, it's the who's above that. Who came up with this stuff? Who's
or operating in a way that it's getting sanctioned because somebody's getting a benefit out of it.
Right.
Someone's getting what they want out of that operation.
And that's the key factor.
I think I should go ahead and say what we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that the victims should look at who they might want to be suing. Very similar to the way that the 9/11 victims' families are suing the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
If Epstein and Maxwell, from even the time back at Towers, were operating their business on behalf of some foreign intelligence service, then I would look at who can I sue?
Yeah, and maybe not just one. Maybe there's three. Maybe there's three intelligence services. Yeah,
maybe there are, and there's plenty of evidence. There really is plenty of evidence, and possible paper on the money. Even it's in some places to launch a lawsuit and let discovery reveal what it's going to reveal.
That would be a fascinating event. We should probably wrap up soon, but I wanted to just remind everyone that Bill Barr has one other thing that is very prominent in his record about covering up, and that is he's covering up of Epstein. Now, he wasn't directly involved in the 2008 cover-up when Alex Acosta said, Epstein was involved in some sort of intelligence, and he was told that Epstein needed this light sentence, which was basically like a year and a half in a Holiday Inn type facility. Well, not quite Holiday Inn, but certainly that kind of facility. And Bill Barr, when Epstein was first rearrested, he what's the term again? Sorry, I'm just losing my brain a little bit. Recused himself from interfering in the Epstein or in being involved.
And then he unrecused.
Right. That was based on him.
He said, no, I gotta come back. I gotta come back in on this. Yeah.
That was based on him being a former counselor at Kirkland and Ellis, a Chicago law firm that also had Jay Lefkowitz, who was Epstein's lawyer, had previously worked there. Epstein's direct lawyer, who was, by the way, I think hired by Dershowitz, or at least first put together that team by Dershowitz. And also working there at some point in the past was Alex Acosta, the very prosecutor who decides to give Epstein the light sentence. So I don't know what's going on in this law firm, but this does seem like an interesting nexus of activity because it's Lefkowitz and Acosta who'd work out the deal to get Epstein off in secret with all the victims not finding out until after the fact that this thing had been struck. That is Friends in High Places. That is not
Friends in High Places. That's a follow the lawyers. Is what are the rules, right? Follow the money and follow the lawyers. You can, look, some law firms are just really, really good at and specialized in these crimes, and that's who you go to. You want those guys to come in and help you. And then some lawyers are the Roy Cohns of the world, and in the baby toddler, version, kind of sad bus version, you have the Michael Cohens of the world, where they're lawyers because if they're there putting deals together, listening in on conversations, then it's sort of that attorney-client privilege cloud can come over over any discovery around what was really happening. Now, that doesn't end up working out all the time because you can't use that privilege, as we all know, just to cover up for criminal activity as some kind of shield. But I don't know, this law firm, there's a lot going on with this law firm.
Yeah. See, in addition to that, there's Jay Lefkowitz, who seems like a fine lawyer, seems like a nice enough person. Also, happened to work in the White House for President George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush. He served as the United States Special Envoy of Human Rights in North Korea. I believe he worked for Reagan as well in a lower capacity. And if I remember my research correctly on this guy, he's also one of the key architects of the Refusnik program to bring Jews from Soviet Union in. Now that's an odd, and very unusual set of coincidences, if they are coincidences.
Yeah, and it's another one of those. It's just another one of those territories where you wander into it, and you sort of like, I just want to wander out of this as fast as possible. In terms of looking at what everyone might be up to, it's just sad.
It is sad, and I still don't, as much as I. Every time I keep clunking into this issue of, who are these foreign nations, I don't think we know. I don't think we know the full extent of it yet. I think we maybe know a cover story of a cover story, but I don't think we even have a clue of what's really going on. And that's unsettling. It, in some ways, makes me feel better. Okay, it's not just this one country, but it's lots of different forces and networks and overlapping networks that we can't always see. We can't see, actually. I think we can, you've been able to identify publicly this huge organized crime network, but there are others on top of that and below that, and who knows how they fit in, but it's quite a web.
It's quite a web, and I do think following the criminals and their money exposes a lot. And I think we've gotten to a point in this great experiment, post World War II experiment, certainly of world order, where you can see where the underworld of organized crime got so big, so much money in that second economy, so much of that money flooding in to our realm, right? That whole nations have become, not the people, but the power, have become corrupted by not just the money, but the individuals. And this is the danger. This is the danger that has been there from the very beginning, frankly, in that intersection between mobsters and spies of, intelligence services need to stop using these people, because it seems like, okay, the only way to infiltrate networks and the only way to have your national security, and I understand the sense of it. I understand the sense of working with these primarily men over all these years and using their banks and using their ops and using their people and using their distribution networks so that you can infiltrate them and see what's going on. But here's what happens. What happens is they end up with promise. Then what happens is they just take you over. Yeah, it would be great for your show to get some former prosecutors of our mafia. We've got a lot of them out there that are great, and listen to what they say about how you don't hand power over. You don't hand power of an intelligence service over, even if you think, oh, I'm going to run the mobsters. I've got it. I'm a division within, CIA or whatever, and we'll just run these mobsters. We'll just do what we need them to do. No, they're going to take you over. You won't know what hit you.
Absolutely. There's just no way of knowing where this ends once you start a game like this. And clearly that's where we are today. I mean, you can't look at the events since 2016 in the United States and not tie them back to these events, maybe even sooner. You could probably go back to World War II, but you can definitely go back to the 70s and see a chain of events that led us from having an independent CIA, or at least appeared to be independent CIA, to one that seems to have been co-opted. And maybe it's not just the CIA, maybe it's a broad intelligence community.
It's not, and let's not hit on.
That's actually it's an important point. Yeah, I should be careful of that.
Everyone gets into that. Be careful of that, because, and I want to, I don't want to sound that way.
100% correct. Yeah.
You're never going to move me off the ball that we are the good guys. It's just, you're never going to move me off that ball.
Without a doubt, we are. I also think we are also under the enormous attack by a presence, a force that we can't even quite comprehend yet. That's so. But the vast majority of people who work at the intelligence community in the United States are doing amazing work every day, and under these conditions, where they're literally under attack.
They're under attack from within.
Yeah.
It's been horrible to watch. It's been painful, and it's been dangerous. It's dangerous for us.
Yeah.
And we will prevail. We really will. I do. It's either that or the whole thing is over anyway. So.
We'd hope to live in a world where there's still freedom, because I think that's really what's at stake. I mean, there's nothing less than that. It really is. We're talking about basic freedoms, and whether people on this planet are going to have those in the future. And that's why the stakes are so high, and that's why all this work is so crucial, to be able to fully understand what happened in all these events. We're going to keep on this because we have a lot of stuff we've got to get to.
All right, let's hunt down these fucketeers.
Let's get those fucketeers. This is not being narrative. This is not being narrative. But
I'm so sorry.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. I'm going to keep that forever. I might even frame it for my desk. All right, LB, thanks for hanging out for the last hour. It's really good to hear your thoughts. And Eric, thank you. I know you had to go, but thanks very much. And don't forget, you can get the podcast right now on either the Apple iPod player. You can watch it there, which is great. Don't forget to subscribe, rate it, share it, do whatever you need to make sure people get to see it and hear it. If you don't have an Apple player, you can also go to our narrativelive.podbean.com page. That's where you can get the podcast and watch them. And once I'm done this, I'll hopefully get to upload the audio-only versions, which will appear on Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and all those other apps that don't have video. That'll take me a little bit of time this evening, but you'll see it later on.